Get a life, said Thomas Merton, the famous Trappist monk and writer, to a room full of would-be monks at the Abbey of Gethsemane. Okay, so he didn't say it in quite those words. He said, men, before you can have a spiritual life, you've got to have a life. So in other words, get a life. Parker Palmer, the Quaker writer and activist, tells about the first time that he heard a recording of Merton's talk. He was in his 30s, seeking a more spiritual life, yearning for something deeper and truer than a head full of religious ideas, he said. As Palmer reflects on Merton's message, he says, those incisive words, the monastic equivalent of get a life, laid bare my false notion that becoming spiritual meant leaping from the muck of my daily life into godlike clarity and purity. Wow, he's right, thought Palmer. I need to get a life. No, wait, I've already got one. It's a god-awful mess, he says, but I think he's saying that only there can I find my spiritual path. It took me some time as I embarked on sabbatical to internalize this wisdom, that the mess and the mundaneness of daily life are the foundation of the spiritual life. Initially, I thought I needed to make time and space away from the demands of daily life in order to deepen my spiritual life. But instead, what I learned is that it is through those everyday activities that we can experience the holy. Today's sermon is part 2 of what I am calling in my head the Sabbatical Insights series. There's so much to be said about those 6 months given to me by the Congregation for Rest and Renewal. Last week, I talked about the kind of rest I got, the kind of rest I didn't get, and how the experience of deep rest helps us face the world as it is. Today, I come to you with a message about the sacred and the mundane, and with assurance that no matter how busy or full or messy or boring your life is, there is the stuff of spirituality there in it. Margaret Fuller, one of our Unitarian foremothers and a leader in the 19th century transcendentalist movement, said, "Reverence the highest, have patience with the lowest. Let this day's performance of the most menial duty be thy religion. Are the stars too distant? Pick up the pebble that lies at thy feet, and from it learn the all." Fuller's words remind us that that gray thing on the ground may not look like much, but if we pick it up, new insights or enjoyments might open up to us. We may even find something that sustains and nourishes us, even something holy. Like the fountain in Denise Levertov's poem. It is there among the scalloped gray and green stones. It is still there and always there, with its quiet song and strange power to spring in us up and out through the rock. One of my favorite children's books, one of those that carries multiple layers of meaning for all ages, is the book Frederick by Leo Leone. Frederick is a mouse who approaches life differently than the rest of his family. They live in a stone wall, not far from a barn and a granary, but the farmers had moved away and the barn was abandoned and the granary was empty. Winter was coming, so the little mice began scurrying around gathering food for the winter. They all worked day and night, all except for Frederick. When they asked, "Frederick, why don't you work?" he said, "I do work. I gather sun rays for the cold, dark winter days." And when they saw him sitting there staring at the meadow, they asked, "And now, Frederick?" "I gather colors," he answered, "for winter is gray." And once, Frederick seemed half asleep, and they asked reproachfully, "Are you dreaming, Frederick?" But he said, "Oh no, I'm gathering words, for winter is long and we'll run out of things to say." When winter came, the little field mice took refuge in their stone wall. And in the beginning, there was lots to eat, and they told stories, and they were happy. But over time, they devoured all of the food they had gathered, and it was cold, and no one felt like chatting anymore. But then they remembered what Frederick had said and asked, "What about your supplies, Frederick?" And he told them to close their eyes. And he said, "Now I send you the rays of the sun. Do you feel their golden glow?" And as Frederick spoke, the mice began to feel warmer. Was it his voice? Was it magic? "Close your eyes again," he said. And when he told them about the blue periwinkles, the red poppies, the yellow wheat, and the green leaves of the berry bush, they saw the colors as clearly as if they were painted in their minds. "And what about the words, Frederick?" So he cleared his throat and paused, and then, as if from a stage, he said, "Who scatters the snowflakes? Who melts the ice? Who spoils the weather? Who makes it nice? Who grows the four-leaf clovers in June? Who dims the daylight? Who lights the moon? 4 little field mice who live in the sky. 4 little field mice like you and I. One is the spring mouse who turns on the showers. Then comes the summer who paints in the flowers. The fall mouse is next with walnuts and wheat, and winter is last with little cold feet. Aren't we lucky the seasons are 4? Think of a year with 1 less or 1 more." And when Frederick finished, they all applauded. "But Frederick," they said, "you're a poet." And Frederick blushed, and he took a bow and said shyly, "I know it." I love Frederick. We all need more people like Frederick in our life. Frederick not only got a life, but he gave life and sustenance to others. He knows the importance of gathering up not just useful items like corn and berries and nuts, but also the simple things like sunshine and colors and words which don't run out and which make life worth living. Somewhere along my sabbatical journey, I came across the phrase, "Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity," in a poem by David White. I think it was then that my mindset shifted. We don't have to remove ourselves from the familiar to experience life on a deeper level. Bringing the discipline of alertness to those most familiar things in our lives can take us there as well. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. And so I committed myself to the spiritual discipline of alertness and attention, to my surroundings, to the natural world, and to the living beings in my life. As I became more alert and attentive, amazing things started catching my eye, like these shells on the beach on a windy day. Or like this stump of a palm tree. I had no idea what a palm tree looked like inside, but looking at this, I thought, wow, nature is so divine. And then there was the chorus of birds singing, barely visible in the tree above my lunch spot, but echoing in the air with so many different calls and responses. Just listen to this for a little bit. These birds had a lot to say. One of the gifts of sabbatical was being able to spend some more time and to be more present with those who are part of my life every single day. My family, our dog, our neighbors. I was able to give them my undivided attention and to witness the magic in everyday interactions in a way that I don't always tap into, to be honest. As I talked about a little in last week's sermon, they became some of my spiritual teachers. In practicing alertness and attention myself, I saw others practicing it as well. I saw my daughter Ellery making visual connections that I never would have made. One day, for example, she looked at my t-shirt, a shirt I've been wearing for over 20 years from an independent movie theater in my hometown. Spectrum 7 Cinemas, it says on the front. And she asked, "Mama, is that a new shirt?" I was confused, and so I said, "No, why?" She then asked, "Did you get it at Central Market?" And then she pointed to the word cinemas written in a scrawling script. And it took me a second, but I realized that she recognized the script as the same used in the Central Market logo, the logo for a store she'd been to maybe a handful of times. Her attention to her everyday surroundings is just astounding. I try to pay attention to what she pays attention to. I take in a lot more that way. I also saw my son MD practicing it, very much in the spirit of Margaret Fuller. I discovered a few months back that he had a rock collection in the top drawer of his bedside table. Everywhere he goes, he brings home rocks. Ordinary, gray, dusty rocks. He used to sit down on the sidewalk during our walks around the neighborhood and play with the rocks and the dirt while the rest of us wanted to keep going. A few months ago, he spotted a piece of brick covered in construction dust on the street behind our car and insisted on bringing it home. His car seat cup holders contain a growing collection of rocks and even a few shells from our beach trip in the spring. I also saw our dog Indigo practicing it. A month after the loss of our elderly dog on New Year's Day, we got a black lab puppy. There's a reason Mary Oliver published entire volumes of poetry inspired by her dog. Dogs, especially puppies, are alert to everything. Every smell, sight, and sound. She can sniff out the one piece of food in an entire yard. She knows when her doggy friends are passing by and runs to the front window to bark. She pays very close attention, waiting for your attention to drift elsewhere, and then seizes the opportunity to do something really naughty. When we are alert and attentive to these things, these everyday, seemingly mundane things, we become more aware of our interconnectedness with all beings, and we're better able to cultivate and nurture those connections. When we're alert and attentive, we can find the sacred in the mundane. We can witness love, beauty, freedom, evidence of the holy, that mystery beyond all naming, right in front of us and all around us. There's a Middle Eastern story about a man who was falsely identified as a criminal and imprisoned. His friend visited and left him a prayer rug. Now, the prisoner went angrily back to his cell. He had hoped for a hacksaw or a knife or something like that, and all he'd gotten was this rug. But since he had it, he figured he might as well use it. So he started bowing on the rug to pray. Each day he became more familiar with the pattern woven into the rug, and he started to see an interesting image there. It was a diagram of the lock that allowed him to open the cell and escape. Freedom of the heart is not found by looking up. It's right here, woven in the colors beneath our feet. Sometimes what we need to be free is right in front of us if we only pay attention. Don't say there is no water to solace the dryness at our hearts. I have seen the fountain springing out of the rock wall and you drinking there. The quest to find the sacred and the mundane is not a solo journey. As a church, we help each other find the fountains in our midst. We help each other see through the ordinary to something deep and meaningful and sacred. We help each other experience the holy. And when we find the holy all around us, we may also become more attentive to it in ourselves. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "The invariable mark of wisdom is to see the miraculous in the common, for all our life is a miracle." So, my friends, get a life. Or rather, seek that life within and around you. What common experiences will you gather from which you may learn the all, find sustenance and solace, and become free? It's there in the most ordinary gray rocks and tree stumps, in the daily rhythm of life and work and family, in children and dogs, in the colors woven beneath our feet. For this is where our spiritual life begins. May it be so for you, and amen.